We are continuing with 3 minutes of Tehillim. This Tehillim we're up to next is Psalm 144, Kuf Nun Dalid. So, not Kuf Nun Dalid, that should be Kuf Mem Dalid. Kuf Mem Dalid. Now, usually I go through like an inspirational thought or an insight into the Psukim, but this time I couldn't resist. There's a fascinating discussion about sort of Jewish history, which I have a soft spot for. So just indulge me for a moment. I think you'll find it very interesting. So Kuf Mem Dalid, Pasuk Yud and Yud Aleph, you may be familiar with because we say them, or some shuls say them on Shabbos. I'll read them to you, and you'll probably you'll hear them because you'll be familiar with them. Hanosein Cheshua Lamlachim, Hapotzeas David Avdo Mecherev Ra'a. To you who give victory to kings. So you may know that phrase. Comes from, we say the prayer for the government, wherever your country, if you're in a chutz la'aretz, you say a prayer for the government. And then the second part of the pasuk, which is not quoted, is the one who rescues his servant David from the deadly sword. And the next pasuk in Yud Aleph is Pitzeni v'hatzileni miyad b'nei nechar, rescue me, save me from the hands of foreigners, asher pihem diber shav, V'minam yamin shaker, whose mouths speak lies and whose oaths are false. So, first of all, should we be praying for the governments before we get into those psukim that I read for you and try to understand them? So it seems to be pretty open and shut case. The Mishnah in Perek Avos, it's Rabbi Chanin, Perek Gimel Mishnah Beis. Rabbi Chanin is Skana Kohanim Omar Habib Mispal B'Shloma Mishal Malchus. You should pray for the welfare of the government. Shalmolim Ora, because if not for their people, the fear that it would instill in other people, Ishas Re'eu Chaim below, that everyone would people would swallow each other up alive. And we have Psukim in Yirmiyahu that says pray for the welfare of the government. B'Dirshu Shlom Ha'ir. Pasuk in Ezra. There's many those who advocate for davening for the Shalom Medina. The Chasam Sofer has a comment in Shuvas Chasam Sofer Chelik Vav Simin Sadi Hey, where he mentions that people stopped saying the Tefillah L'Shalom Medina for wherever they were living, and he said it's a terrible thing, and it's caused people to hate us, and it's an awful thing. We should definitely daven. And he quotes not only from psukim that are explicit, he says from Chazal, etc., etc. So it seems to be a very open and shut case. However, it's not necessarily the case. First of all, I would just tell you that from the psukim that we just read, there is a theory that is suggested by some historians. I'm not going to say it's uncontested, but Jonathan Sarna and other historians argue that there's an old tradition of subversive prayers for governments. When the government was very oppressive to the Jewish people, they would make these formal, sort of virtue signaling, or signaling that we support the government, when in private we know that we're doing this because we have to do this. But we should really know that it's not really what we believe. And this is they prove this from all the psukim that are quoted in Hanosein Shua. The one that we just read together, we only quote the first few lines of it. We say the one who gives victory to kings, but we don't say Hanosein Shua l'machlim. But we don't say the next pasuk. We don't say Hapotzeas David Avdo Mecharev Ra, who saves David from the deadly sword. And we don't say the next pasuk Pitzeni v'hatzileni miyad b'nei nechar asher piem diber shav. Hashem saving for those who lie and those who are enemies to us. And it goes on and on. Every pasuk that you read in the Hanosein Shua, the next pasuk in that. Whatever this citation comes from is often very negative, and that's what Jonathan Sarna wants to argue, that there's this basic tradition that Jews prayed aloud. I'm just reading from an article he wrote called "Praying for Governments We Dislike?" ? Centuries of Jews have prayed aloud for the welfare of the sovereign upon them, which their security depends, and read between the lines a more subversive message, a call for rescue, redemption, and revenge. And then he finishes with, I'll just finish with this, just a great line from Fiddler on the Roof. A blessing for the Tsar, of course. May God bless and keep the Tsar far away from us.